Last week, I fed 150 of my podcast episodes into ChatGPT and asked it for suggestions for improvement. Its first suggestion: shorten your introductions. So, without further ado, Todd Cherches, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Thank you, Aaron. I'm ready to plant myself. I see if you have plant right behind you, so I'm ready to go.
Yeah, let me know if it moves. I
Okay, well, I'll
gotta
do that.
keep
Like
my
a
eye
little
on it.
shop of horrors, a little shop of horrors kind of plant.
Feed me, Seymour.
I still,
I feel like we could do an entire podcast on just giving each other inside joke lines.
yeah, pop cultural references of I'll take pop culture references of the 70s and 80s.
All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see how many we can slip in and get some Easter eggs in there. Anyway, you are an executive coach. You're a leadership um, trainer and mentor and coach. You are author of Visual Leadership with only one L.
In
But
fact, I'll hold it up right here as a plug
nice.
here.
But it
You
is a
also just
cat.
mentioned you just mentioned Easter eggs, which is a metaphor. We'll be talking about metaphors shortly. But other people like Easter eggs. What does that have to do with anything, right? So that's a great
Mm,
example of the metaphor we just throw around, and other people may be confused by it, especially communicating across cultures.
I just started a podcast with a friend of mine who's a teacher of business English for people for whom English is their second or third or fourth language.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the use of metaphor and how we have to be careful, that people can understand. And you have a whole chapter in the book about baseball and whether it flies in other cultures. And we found when we were listening to each other speak, we could not get through a single sentence without a metaphor.
Yeah, I mean, language is metaphor. There's a quote that I just gave to someone the other day that says we speak in metaphor, we learn in metaphors and stories, right? So that's how culture is passed along, even long before the written language. Stories and metaphors, and yeah, someone did a study. I forget the percentage. There was something like 50% or 50 to 70% of language is metaphorical, and we don't even realize that.
And I remember reading that if you want to be literal, literal is a metaphor. It means like a letter. So
That's true. Yeah, that's great. I love that. I'm gonna have to borrow that, but I'll quote you on
nice. So let's get started with your story because or some of your stories, however you'd like to curate them for us. Where'd you come from? How'd you become who you are?
That's an interesting question. That's always I'm obsessed with origin stories and etymology. So I'm at etymology.com like at least once or twice or 10 times a day to look up origins. So my origin story, I grew up in Queens, New York. I talk loud and fast, even though I'm an introvert, but that you have to be loud and fast to survive in New York. Then grew up on Long Island after that, and then went to school in Albany. But my dream, I talk about this in my TED talk on the power of visual thinking. My dream was to work in was television. That sounds like you are. We're both obsessed with television growing up, and pop culture. So people would say to me as a kid, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And my dream was to be Spider-Man. I'd Superman. I'd fly around the house wearing my mother's dish towel as my cape. I was never to be found without a cape growing up. But then people would say, "Well, what if you can't be Superman?" My backup plan was to be Batman. So those were my two career aspirations. So I knew later on I had to do something in television. And I worked in advertising in New York for Ogilvy and Mather for a year before moving to LA. And I worked for a number of entertainment companies in LA. I worked for Michael Nesmith of the Monkees. That was my very first job. Most
Ah,
of my students have no idea who that is or who he is, but that was an amazing experience. Sitting at the front desk, just answering phones, and Mickey Dolenz walks in and says, "Hi, I'm here for lunch with Mike." So again, we're throwing around names that you recognize. I'm sure
uh-huh.
younger viewers may not.
So
And then I
this
worked
was
in
this was after Laurel Canyon,
uh,
right?
Laurel
Like
Canyon.
all the musicians, Joni Mitchell and Crosby, Stills and
Yes.
Nash and the
Yeah, this was
Monkees.
I hate to age myself, but this was 1986. So
Okay,
but then
okay. So
I have to
they were
work.
already starting on the oldie circuit, the nostalgia circuit at
Yeah,
that
yeah.
point.
He was, but what most people don't know about him, he was one of the founders of MTV. If it wasn't, he started creating music videos long before anyone else did. So he took, like the Beatles did movies like Help, the Monkees try to be the American version of the Beatles, and then he started creating music videos, and it led to, with Bob Pittman, the creation of MTV. So it's an interesting backstory. Then I worked for Aaron Spelling on Dynasty. I just put scripts together as a production assistant. And then I worked in casting for Columbia Pictures, comedy at Disney, and then drama program development at CBS. So those were Todd the TV years. And then I got out of television. I worked in the theme park business as a project manager. And I talk about that in my TED Talk, the project I managed in China, which kind of was my origin story of visual thinking, because to communicate across language and cultural lines, I had to pick up my pen and did a lot of drawing, a lot of sketching, even though I was not a great artist. We did a lot of nonverbal and visual communication. So that's the first time the light bulb went off, metaphor, that hey, we need to communicate visually, especially to get an idea out of our head and into the heads of other people. So my catchphrase is, how do you get people to see what you're saying? And that's a big part of the foundation of the work that I do. So
Gotcha.
that's my origin story that brings us up to the end of my LA years. I was out there for 10 years. I moved back to New York and ended up randomly with a job for a management training company. And then I got hooked on management leadership books. I realized all my horrible bosses that I had, that was the recurring theme in my life and career up until that point, was just really awful bosses, bad managers, and no leadership. But I discovered all these books, and it was like, that's what I've been doing ever since, is management leadership and helping to make the world a better place, one leader at a time.
Nice. So I'm struck between my own reaction to you saying you worked at Ogilvy and Mather and working in television, which both are, from the inside, might feel a little bit similar, like they're about creativity and communication and expression. When I think of, and I'm saying this as a guy who's a marketer for 10 years, I feel like marketing is a bullshit job.
Yeah.
But television could be, but it could also be incredibly uplifting and moving people forward and creating conversations. I'm wondering how you navigated those two and what your experiences were.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, everything I do and everything, when you think about it, it's all about storytelling, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. When you think of marketing, advertising, television, entertainment, communication, leadership, it's storytelling is central to all of it. And what's interesting is a lot of people think, I teach leadership at NYU in Columbia, and most people assume I was a business major when I was an English literature major with a concentration in Shakespeare and poetry. So my father's like, poetry? What the hell are you going to do with poetry? Is you going to sit under a tree rhyming all day? That's not a tough way to make a living. But I weave in the humanities and the arts and literature and pop culture into everything I do. So it's interesting. It took me a long time to find my niche, like that ikigai intersection of, what I do, what I love, and what I can make a living at. And I have a chapter in my book called The Passion Skill Matrix, which is a model I developed before. Someone said that's kind of like ikigai, and I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then I discovered ikigai, and it's very similar. But I think that's that's the thematic link between my childhood, pop culture, being an English major, and everything I've done since. It's all about people, communication, and storytelling, and with metaphor being a key, visual thinking being a key. So, weaving in music references, baseball references, it's all part of storytelling and communicating with other people. So we may have a conversation that's different from someone else because we grew up in the same era, we watched the same TV shows. We can mention things, Seinfeld-related references or whatever. Michael Gelb, by the way, who I had coffee with last week, who sends his regards, he's another Seinfeld nut. So we met for coffee, probably sprinkled in 100 Seinfeld references within that 1 hour coffee. We knew what we were talking about. Someone else from another culture might say, Art Vandelay, who was that?
Mm. Well, I'll drop a name. When I lived in North Carolina, I'm an ultimate frisbee player, and I would volunteer to captain one of the teams in the local fall and spring leagues, because if I didn't, I wouldn't get any playing time because I wasn't very good. So if I was the captain, I could at least put myself in a fair amount.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the players on our team, the name sounded familiar. I didn't know why. It was Jedediah Purdy, which is a great name. Like, if you just hear the name and you don't know him, you're like, that's a great name. Mm-hmm. And discovered he was then a professor at Duke, and he was young for being a professor, a law professor. And I started looking up his background. He'd written all these books, and one of the things that he was well known for, his first book, like right out of college, I think it was called For Common Things. And he had an entire chapter critique of Seinfeld for its nihilistic worldview. And he came out as
Mm.
a very idealistic person. And I think Seinfeld then had some episodes in which they had a character playing a Jedediah Purdy,
Okay.
kind of cutting him back down. So that's my
Yeah.
Seinfeld
All right. Great.
story.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. So again, we're aware. That's a key point. Like the things, a big part of visual leadership and visual thinking is what we notice has so much to do, our awareness has to do with our paradigms, right? What we see and what we miss. We pick up on things that are within our lens from our culture, our upbringing, our schooling, our interests, all those kinds of things, while something else may just whiz by our head. Like you mentioned some references in your book, your great book that you wrote with Peter Bregman, that you can't change other people. You mentioned some references that I completely missed, but now if I go back, now that I'm aware of it, I'll probably notice and spot them. So again, it's a lot of it has to do with awareness, right? What we notice and what we see. We go through life with these blinders on. And I'd say, one of the metaphors I use that managers look through a microscope, leaders look through a telescope, and innovators look through a kaleidoscope, right? So
Huh.
just those three different lenses that we look at the world through will determine what we see, but also what we miss.
Nice. So one of the things I really appreciate about your writing and the thinking behind it is you'll find a story, I think, you'll find a story that you like that's going to stick in people's minds and is going to be fun to tell and fun to hear. And then you'll
Mhm.
find the meaning in it. I'm thinking about, right, Donna the Deer Lady,
Mhm.
right? Which I remember that, laughing about it and sharing it, and then coming across it in your book again and saying like, oh, you've not only turned it into a point, you've turned it into a point that I'm going to remember, right? Long after I've forgotten that I read the book.
Yeah, that's such a wacky, crazy story. For those who don't know it, long story short, this woman called into a talk radio show saying, asking why don't they move the deer crossing signs to a less populated area where the deer are less would be safer crossing in traffic. And the hosts were like, the signs are for the drivers, not for the deer. But that always stuck with me. It's such a wacky story, and I love it for that reason. Like growing up as a kid, one of the other chapters in my book is every time we crossed a bridge that said, draw a bridge, my father would say, "Hey, give me a pencil." Right? It's so stupid, one of those really awful, corny dad jokes, but you always remember it. Now, every time you see a sign that says "draw a bridge," you're gonna see it through a different lens if you haven't already, right? So yeah, so that's one of those fun, quirky stories. But that's a great point. I always say to my students, leadership lessons are always hiding in plain sight if we just stop to notice them, right? So that Donna the Deer Lady, you could say, all right, what's a good example of something? You could say, this is something. What does this make me think of, right? What's another way, what's a concept or an idea that this triggered?
Yeah. Well, you also define leadership very broadly. You say, your job, your mission is to help the world one leader at a time, even if you're just leading yourself, right?
Yes.
So that's pretty much all of us.
Yeah, I once attended a leadership symposium at NYU with all these different leadership professors across the school, and there were two camps. There was capital L leadership, like leadership is you're only a leader if you're a VP or CEO if you have a leadership title, and the other camp was the small L category, where everyone's a leader, even if you just like you just said. I said to my students, "How many of you are leaders?" And very few raised their hand. And I say, do you do these things?" And it turns out you're leading your life and you're managing your life. So when you combine the two and say, you know what, I am a leader, because students ask, how do I become a leader? I say, start leading. Well, what does that mean? Well, let's define that. Let's describe it. Let's talk about it. Right. So I
Mhm.
think if we make leadership unattainable, people feel like, oh, this doesn't apply to me. But if we start with, hey, I'm a leader in some way, even within my family, even among my friends, then let's build on that. How can I become a better and more effective leader in my society and in the world?
Yeah. And it's in
It's
some
freeing,
ways,
it's empowering.
sorry, say that again. I missed it.
I said it's empowering to think of yourself as a leader as opposed to something I will never attain. Right.
Right. And I think maybe the word itself and its connotations is a little bit unfortunate that we have to kind of, you know, wrench it from the upper echelons of power. What really helped me was to think about leading, and I got this from Peter Bregman at one of his coach trainings. He said that we're often working with leaders, but in a coaching conversation, we have to be courageous first because they have more at
Hmm.
stake than we do. And he defined leading as going first. It's like, oh, like
Hmm.
that is leading. If I'm leading the field, if I lead with a bid in hearts, all it means is I'm going first.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I do, one of my side gigs, do I have my button on my button? I volunteer for Big Apple Greeter, so I'm one of the New Yorkers who shows people around New York. Don't start all calling me for a tour, but I show people around New York just to make New York a friendlier place because a lot of people traveling here from other places feel very intimidated by it, the big building, the fast pace. But if I just say, hey, I'm showing you around a couple from Australia and saying, there's the Empire State Building, or this is how you get to, Wall Street or whatever, I'm leading, right? So just showing someone which direction to go, pointing them in the right direction, and maybe giving them some information, that's leading. So Peter Drucker said leadership is influence, right? He also said leadership is about having followers. So there's all different definitions. Leadership is having a vision. There's all different definitions of what leadership is. So it really isn't one or the other. It's really a combination. So to me, visual leadership is leading people by helping them to see possibilities and using all my visual thinking tools, tips, and techniques to help them do that. I do a lot of work around servant leadership, which flips the org chart on its head. And servant leadership, the concept, and this comes from Francis Hesselbein, and this comes from somebody, and Robert Greenleaf coined the term, that being a leader is being a servant, right? It's helping other people, showing them the path, creating the next generation of leaders. My job is to serve rather than to be served, right? So it's a whole different way of thinking about leadership that a lot of times people don't even think about. They just toss the word around, but we're all seeing it through a different lens.
Yeah, and you had a story about your experience of servant leadership. I think was it Jeff was
Yes, yeah,
who who got up to when he needed a snack instead of waiting for the lowest paid person in the room, jumped up and brought snacks for everyone.
yeah, yeah. That
Um,
was actually Seth, the CEO in that chapter. That
Seth.
was my former company, LiquidNet.
Okay.
Seth was the CEO. Jeff was my boss, and Jeff is now a friend, colleague, etc. But yeah, Seth is the one who said, "I'm hungry. I'm going to get some potato chips," and he came back with a whole basket of chips and cookies and went around table by table. Not every CEO is going to do that. They're going to say, "I'm hungry. Someone get me a cookie," right? So just that different. It's a very small thing. Stopping by someone's desk and saying, hey, how's your day going? If you've ever had your leader, one of your bosses or a CEO do that, it's just it's a different way of leading as opposed to step into my office, them stopping by your desk and say, hey, how's it going? Right. So just that MBWA or LBWA, leading by walking around. A lot of leaders don't think about that. They're in their ivory tower in their corner office, and they're like, just say, come to my office and let's talk. Right. So just getting out there amongst your people is an act of leadership.
Yeah, and that rhymed with a story from my early years. I was a teacher, and I taught all through college to make more money than I would by serving flipping burgers in the food hall. And I had bosses there, and then I taught at a prestigious prep school for a year, and I had supervisors. And then in my second or third year out of college, I landed in a small Quaker school, and the head of the school, we went on a camping trip to Blairstown, and somebody in the dining hall spilled something, and it clanked, and of course everybody cheers when that happens. And
Mhm.
the principal, Jane, the head of the school, immediately bent down and started cleaning it up, and I was flabbergasted. Like it was
Mm,
so different from any experience I'd had with a leader.
yeah.
Where and it clearly was like she was leading. It was it was servant leadership, but it was also role modeling. It was
Yeah.
also a genuine impulse. I don't think she was strategizing. It was just like this is the person who had created this environment and clearly knew the lessons and the qualities she wanted to impart into the world, and this was just an expression of it. So it rhymed with your story of
Yeah,
Seth.
that's great. Yeah, the willingness to get your hands dirty. And then that same chapter, I think it is, when I was being interviewed, they said, they asked me, do you do Windows? I'm like, you mean like Microsoft Windows? They're like, no, like if the tabletops are dirty, are you willing to get out the Windex and wipe the tabletops off? Like that's part of the culture, right? It's not like someone snapping your fingers and having someone else do it. are you willing to do that, right? So that's, like you said, an act of leadership. It's an act of service. It's saying you're not above everyone else. So yeah, it's a different way of framing what leadership is all about.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about my audience, and
Yeah.
most of them, I think, are not leaders in a capital L positional leadership sense, or they might be in certain circumstances. But everyone, I think people gravitate to this podcast because they're interested in contributing to a better world. And you've shared a lot of tools and strategies that can empower people to do that, both in terms of, their own lives and being more influential with others, and also aspects of management, of efficiency, and just getting things done. Because one of the things that occurred to me is I'm sure you could find a lot of leaders who do leading by walking around who get fired because they're not doing anything else, because
Right.
they're not competent, time managers and a lot of leaders would love to do the walking around and talking, but they're so inundated with tasks, and they're, maybe struggling to delegate or struggling to amass and deploy resources, that they just don't have the time. What, these days, so 2025, what do you think are the most important skills that you're teaching leaders?
Yeah, I mean, in today's post-pandemic world where the whole work from home versus return to office versus hybrid thing is a heated conversation. Among the challenges are, how do you build culture? How do you onboard people? How do you stay connected when people are not always in the office at the same time? You can't stop by someone's desk if they're working from home that day. You can't say, hey, pop into my office, let's go grab lunch together. So it's like, what's the equivalent of that? I think that's one of the challenges of leadership today is how do you, I forget who said, I think it was Warren Bennis who said leadership is like herding cats. I think he was the one using that metaphor. But yeah, it's like, how do you do all this stuff in a world that's so fragmented and all over the place, and not just locally, but globally? How do you find that balance? One of my coaching clients, he has people in Singapore reporting to him and people in London, and he's based in New York, right? So how do you not work 24 hours a day and yet still be there for your people, right? So those are some of the challenges. We need to delegate more. We need to be more proactive rather than reactive in reaching out to people, setting, one-on-one meetings with people and keeping those meetings. One of my, coaching clients, he cancels 90% of the time his one-on-one meetings with his people. And it creates this, all right, I guess it doesn't matter that much. I guess it's not that important. And then when you do check in with them, it shouldn't just be about tasks. How's that project going? It's how are you doing? Right. So again, it's just being more consciously aware. It's being more human. It's being more trying to connect with people. So those are some of the things that leaders really need to be thinking about. It's more complex than ever, but it can be done because there are people who are doing it. So those are some of the things that come to mind as you were asking that question.
Yeah. It's interesting. Last week I asked ChatGPT to scour the internet and, McKinsey and Boston Consulting and World Economic Forum and come up with a list of needed skills and competencies for 2030. And one of the main ones it came up with was this idea of digital leadership, that how do you lead your team when almost all the interactions are digital? Do you have suggestions or examples of people who are doing this well?
I mean, not a lot, but again, one of the one of the courses I teach at NYU, I usually teach in person. During the pandemic, I taught online. I'm teaching a course I just taught a course this semester, and I'm teaching it again in the summer. That's asynchronous. And if you think about synchronicity, it's about timing, right? So asynchronous is you're not in the same place at the same time. So that's been a challenge. It's something I'm still working on. How do you teach people when you have no interaction with them in real time? So it's not like we're on video. When you teach online, it's like this. You have all your students and I have 3 V's that I talk about: visibility, voice, and value. Visibility is about being seen. Voice is about being heard. Value is about making a contribution and then hopefully being recognized for that contribution. So if you're online, if you have your camera off, your mic off, you're not contributing in the chat box and you're not speaking, are you really there? Right? Did you make a contribution? So that's the key thing, is what's the equivalent of that, whether you're online or offline, to having your camera on, mic on, and adding value. I think that's one of the challenges of leadership, and to encourage people to speak up and speak out and engage with people. So everyone's still figuring it out because it's so new, and some people are doing it well, most aren't. So I think that's one of the challenges is if you have a company town hall, someone could just say, oh, I'm just going to watch the recording. because it's not interactive. So a key is make things interactive and engaging, have a chat box, allow people to turn their mics on. So I think that's, we need to think about how can I do this differently to be effective and successful in a digital world. So again, this is all new to us, right? Even AI, how to incorporate AI into what we're doing. Because I was at a faculty meeting for NYU, and I said, if students are using AI to write their papers and professors are using AI to grade those papers, no one really needs to show up, right? Let's just let the robots do all the talking. So like, how do you weave AI and technology into what we're doing, but not let it take the place of our thinking and our learning and our connecting and our interacting, right? So it's a tool that's kind of, everyone's trying to figure out how to use this tool, right? So I think that's one of the key issues in this digital world that we're in today.
Mm. Yeah, and I'm finding that challenging myself because it's getting easier and easier to rely on it, and it's giving better
Yeah.
and better better and better output back to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm finding it's at some point it's almost like someone who gets a car and stops working out, stops running, stops moving their body.
Yeah.
That there's ways in which I think I am becoming weaker as a
Mm-hmm.
thinker
Yeah.
because of my reliance, and I think it's I can see it becoming very addictive.
Yeah. I was funny as you were saying that. I was thinking when I lived in LA, um, I would see people circle the parking lot for a close parking spot to the gym. You're gonna walk 5 miles on the treadmill, but you won't walk 5 steps to the door of the gym, right? So it's like people wait there for a half hour waiting for a parking spot right in front of the door. It's like, we need to change our thinking, right? So that's that always resonated. Talking about observation out in the wild, that's one that always made me laugh, is the people who needed that closest parking space. Even parking in a handicapped spot just so they wouldn't have to walk, an extra 10 steps in bright, sunny LA weather. This wasn't even like in New York in a snowstorm. So again, it's about thinking differently and doing things differently. But the post that you mentioned that you put out with those skills of the future, what was great is you posted that, but you also included your critique, your analysis, your interpretation, your recommendations. That's what we need to do, right? Incorporate AI, but then use critical thinking to interpret it for people. Because otherwise, if you just have AI write your blog post, you could do that every day. You don't have to put any of your own thinking into it. And because I know a few people, it's like, I'm on my 8,000th book. Right? If you're putting out a book every week, but AI is writing it,
Oh,
are you real? It's like, so that's the thing. It's like, how do we not lose the human element, the critical thinking element? Because when my students, 3 students, I was grading a paper in my class last semester. I'm like, did I read this one already? And I went back and I realized 2 students must have put in the same exact prompt because it was almost the exact word for word wording, and 3 of the 4 examples were the exact same examples. That wasn't just coincidence. These were not students even knew each other. So it's like, that's what we're going to get. We're just going to get this homogenized stuff put out by the robots if we're not using critical thinking and creative thinking. And there's one chapter in my book called The 10 Types of Thinking. We need to use all 10 types in different ways at different times. Otherwise, we're not doing any thinking. And because I see critical thinking skills are declining, writing skills are declining, and this is just a few years into AI because people are becoming so reliant on technology.
mm. So what do you do with your students? How do you teach in a way that gives them the opportunity and the necessity to develop skills rather than just relying on these tools?
Yeah, that's a great question. I came up with a framework that I call the learning triangle. And my students, when they submit an essay, they have to connect the dots between the class content, the outside world, and themselves. So while you can get AI to assist you, if you have to share your own story, like a behavioral interviewing question, tell me about a time that you used this, or how can you use this in the future, that forces you to incorporate your own life experiences. If I say, here's what we talked about in class, but give me an outside example from the world, from the news, from sports, from entertainment, from another, something else that you read, they have to integrate. So this is an exercise in integrative thinking and creative thinking where you have to connect the dots between these 3 components. So yes, you could still find a workaround and incorporate AI, but if you have to tell me a story, a leadership lesson you learned from your parents, one, you're creating a system that forces people to think, but also hopefully students are more engaged by that. Yeah, let me think about, so what did I learn about leadership from my parents, right? Just tell me a story about a time that your parents did something that was not that was an act of leadership, but that backfired or that work had a negative impact on you, right? If you engage people with the question, they're more likely to engage with it and with you than if you just ask them direct, you know, write a paper on the differences between management and leadership. Okay, that's interesting, but give me some examples from the outside world and share some personal stories that explain it and demonstrate it. That's a different type of exercise. So that's what I do. In fact, I wrote an article that was published in my only article published in the New York Times. That was, and I'm happy to share the link with you. Where I wrote about how I incorporate the news and the outside world into my teaching. So again, it's hopefully more engaging for students and will encourage and inspire them rather than everything being a contest where everyone's trying to game the system and do the least work possible. Because I said you're only fooling yourself in terms of your learning and your thinking and your growth and development if you just going to hand in papers submitted by the robots.
Mm. Are your students nervous about the future? Like for their own future?
There's a lot of anxiety. Not only my students, but even my maybe former executive coaching clients. Everyone's nervous because there's so much, we live in, what they call a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And it's more hyper VUCA than ever because no one knows what the future is going to hold. Things are politically, economically. So I'm finding that people are less willing to make long-term commitments because they don't know what the future is going to bring. So yes, my students are nervous. My senior clients are nervous. Everyone's nervous and there's a lot of anxiety, isolation, loneliness. People are in need of sanity checks. And that's where the human element really comes into play when you can commiserate with other people and say, hey, what are you experiencing? What are you feeling? So I would say, yes, there's a lot of anxiety out there because of all the unknowns, right? When our jobs that exist today, I always say, when I started out in the mailroom and worked my way up to the proverbial corner office, there's no mailroom anymore because there's no mail, right? And there's no email room as far as I know. And the corner office, do people even care about that, right? I'd rather be at my corner Starbucks or in the corner office in my apartment, right? So that old paradigm of working your way up, I'll become a leader over the next 30 years and get that gold watch. The whole paradigm is out the window, right? So how do we motivate people? What is the career path if the traditional path doesn't exist anymore? What do you do when you're 50 and your boss is 25? How does that impact your ego? How does it impact how you go about your business? So the old order of things doesn't exist anymore. In fact, a lot of my clients' references, I keep this on my desk to remind me not to be a dinosaur. I say to my clients, like, when you tell a story that begins with, when I worked at IBM in 1985, people are like, this is what they're thinking, right? They're not thinking, oh, look at the whys. They've been working for 50 years. It's like they're thinking this person's outdated. So I keep my dinosaur as one of my visual cues on my desk to keep my references up to date. I mentioned Simon and Garfunkel in my class. My students thought that was a management consulting firm. So our references need to be current and as well as our metaphors and our stories.
Nice. So one of the I've been reading my usual diet of sort of leadership and social science books, and I've also been reading books sort of about the political situation and moral philosophy. I've just almost finished Moral Ambition by Rutger Bregman, and like thinking about like the opportunity of all this chaos might be that we get to do work that's meaningful to us, that actually solves big problems. And I know in times of tension and crisis, it's very natural to kind of just fall back on self-protection. I felt that energy a lot having moved to Spain and being kind of cut off from my network and my typical, ways of making a living and feeling like, screw the world. I just gotta, I gotta take care of myself first, but also seeing in all this chaos, maybe, new paradigms being born. And I'm wondering as someone who is not a dinosaur, what's your reflection on that?
Yeah, I mean, that classic serenity kind of thought process of what can I change and what can I not? What are some things we can get so obsessed and paralyzed by things that are beyond our control? We need to think about what is within our realm of control? What can I have an impact on? I'm always thinking about the starfish story. I used to have a starfish on my desk, but then the legs broke off. Starfish story is for those who don't know, it's like there's a beach with hundreds of starfish washed up on the shore that are still alive. and this young girl or young boy is throwing them back into the ocean, saying, someone says you can't make a difference because there's so many out there, and she said I made a difference to that one, right? So sometimes, as with that starfish story, we can make a difference on that one person or that one group or that one community where we're having an impact, right? So if leadership, a big part of leadership is about impact and influence, we can impact and influence those within our sphere of within our circle, right? So we can expand our circle, we can work with people. So I think it feels overwhelming and daunting because we can't change the world, like in baseball, using a baseball analogy, my baseball on my desk. You can't you can't hit a grand slam if there's no one on base, right? So those who don't speak baseball have no idea what I'm talking about, but you can't have to score 4 runs if if there's no runners on base, right? So sometimes we're thinking, if I can't do that, then why do anything? So I think we need to shift our mentality and say, all right, what can I do that will make a difference? What can I do to make the world better, even for one person? So I think that's what we need to do, start small. And then, leadership is about, a big part of leadership is about helping to develop the next generation of leaders. If that's within your realm, that's why I teach. People say, why do you teach? It's like, I may only impact those 20 students in my class, but how many people will those 20 impact? And I've been teaching for 15 years. I've had over 600 or 700 students. Those are all the people who are out there in the world who I've been able to impact and influence. And hopefully they will make a difference, and they'll not be those horrible bosses, not be those people who are all for themselves. So I think that's what we need to do is start, basically think one person at a time.
I suddenly had a visual of Mr. Holland's Opus as you were
Yes,
speaking.
I was just thinking that just as I was speaking. But I didn't know how obscure that reference was, but of course you picked up on it. So maybe
It could be very obscure.
someday I'll come back and all my students. In fact, this is a true story. This young woman from China just sent me an email. She was in my very first class back in 2011, so 14 years ago, and sent me a note saying she was going through old emails and she just wanted to reach out to me. And I mean, that's why I do this, right? Not for the ego. In fact, let me pull it out here. I keep a smile file. And this is what I put when I get thank you notes, when I get, here's a note I got from a Wall Street trader, a Wall Street stock trader, sent me a handwritten thank you note saying how much he loved. It was a career highlight for me. I can't wait to put this new knowledge to work. So when people say, why do you do what you do? It's like these cards, keep the cards and letters coming. But just the idea of, keep a smile for yourself. Because there are times that you're going to have bad days, or times that you say, why am I even wasting my time doing this? It's like, keep a tangible reminder of those messages you get, because it's inspirational, and it's nice to see the impact we've had on people over the years.
That's beautiful. I suddenly realized that if I'd received a note like that, I would have held it upside down to see if a 20 fell out.
Or a check, yes. That would be nice, but yeah, I'll take the gratification of the thank you. The thank you is thanks enough. So. But it's not, kidding around, but it's true. It's like to express, gratitude. I always talk about 4 G's of leadership: be genuine, genuineness, generosity, graciousness, and gratitude. So genuineness is about just being yourself. Don't say, I'm a leader now, there's a new sheriff in town. You're not playing a part. Just bring your true, authentic self to work. That's being genuine. Generous is looking to give more than to get. Gracious is about being polite, forgiving, human. And gratitude is having that attitude of appreciation, right? So if you go about your leadership or just about your life with those 4 G's, you're going to have a greater impact. You're going to be seen as a leader by people. You can have impacts on people. So again, it's not, this is very much a servant leadership philosophy. Even before I even heard the term servant leadership, is the idea is to Frances Hesselbein, who was the CEO of the Girl Scouts for many years and is a mentor to Marshall Goldsmith and others. She said, to live is to serve, and to serve is to serve, to lead, to serve is to live, and to live is to lead, right? Or something like that, some combination. I'm mangling the quote. But basically the whole idea is like, we're here to help other people, right? So if you have that attitude, how can you do that? Whether you're a student, a teacher, a boss, you're in customer service. If you're in customer service and you don't care to serve your customers, then maybe you're not in the right job, right? So it's that type of thing. It's having that attitude of how can I help, right? Regardless of whatever it is that you do.
Mm. Yeah. I had a thought. It's gone.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe it'll come back.
All right. I'm
So
further out the thoughts. I'm further out the millions of other thoughts in there. So
yeah,
yeah.
no, that was the one.
Uh,
Kiss my Nobel Prize goodbye.
You just remind me of Jerry Seinfeld's joke about, his mother saying, if you eat that cookie, you're gonna ruin your appetite. He's like, there's another appetite that's coming right behind this one, so I'm not gonna worry about that.
Okay, I just got a Mitch Hedberg line. Do you know Mitch?
I've heard the name, but I don't know him
Yeah.
personally.
He says, people ask me how I come up with jokes. He says, I think of something funny and then I look for a pencil. And if I can't find a pencil, I convince myself it wasn't that funny.
Okay. That's good. That works. That's worth it. I actually have an I don't want to give them a free plug, but Aqua Notes waterproof notepad in my shower because 90% of my ideas come up in the shower. So, and their slogan is "Don't let your good ideas go down the drain." So, you ever get an idea in the shower and then you're like trying to hold it until you get out? So sometimes my wife's knocking on the bathroom door saying, "Are you ever coming out of there?" I'm like, "I'm working in here." So, although I tried to get them to come up with it to create a flip chart size version, but they have not done that. They're all memo pad size. But you want to catch those ideas. The worst way to come up with an idea is to sit down in front of a blank piece of paper or a blank computer screen saying, all right, what can I write? 90% of our ideas come when we're not thinking of them. So we need to capture them. That's why I encourage my clients and my students, keep a journal, capture things in that moment. And then when you need them, they're there. Like when I sat down to write my book, I had 15, 20 years worth of content accumulated from writing down all these metaphors and stories and everything else. So
yeah, and that's one area where I really am excited about AI because it's so good at capturing and collating. And I heard about a new thing like 2 days ago. Have you heard about this? I think it's called Infinity.ai. It's a little pendant that you buy and it records everything all day, automatically uploads it to the cloud, and it figures out like what's, the shopping list that you can not pay attention to and what are your ideas and conversations. And
we really have to watch what we're saying because you were on video or audio recording all the time. Like you sent me this great Fathom recap of our conversation last week. This was great. I was like, wow, I didn't even know we said that. So it's like, but it was really helpful. I'm a big note taker, but yeah, if you have AI capture it, great. We always have to fine tune things. Things aren't always 100%, but all these AI technologies are making our lives easier, but we also have to, think about the human side of it as well. Is it accurate? Is it representative? Is this what we want? I love the idea of translation because when you talk with people from other languages and other cultures, it's really helpful, with expressions. Like a lot of professors say to their students, they even collect their cell phones so they won't be they'll say, put them in the basket. I say to my students, first of all, use your devices, whether it's your laptop or cell phone, as long as you're paying attention. If you want to look up who is Peter Drucker, if you want to make a note to yourself about something or use it for note taking. And I said, my other faculty colleagues say, well, what if they're on their Netflix or shopping on Amazon? I said, that's your fault, right? If your students are not engaged in what you're saying and they're doing other things, because I do faculty observations and sometimes I'll sit in the back of the room and students will be typing vigorously and the professors are thinking, oh, they're just capturing my every word. Meanwhile, they're sending emails, they're playing computer games because I can see their open laptop in the back of the room. So if you're not engaging your students or your people, that's your fault, right? So I think that's the key, is not to restrict the use of technology, but to encourage them to use it for good rather than for evil.
I'm going to challenge you a little bit on that one from my own experience of, crossing the line into addiction, right? Like, you're saying like, you have to be more interesting than, cocaine and hookers, like.
I didn't say that. Those are your words, not mine.
Those are my words.
I get the metaphor. We're not talking literally here. That is metaphorical. But, yeah.
Right. Although if AI gets confused and attributes to you, that's nothing I can do about that.
No, but we're in a world of never-ending interruptions and distractions. So we need to figure out a way to navigate around that. Like, if you're a CEO doing a town hall, are you engaging people? I was coaching a CFO who was boring people to death with his projections and his numbers. And I said to him, your numbers are meaningless outside. And I paused. I said, outside of their context and outside the story you're trying to tell. What is the story you're trying to tell? People don't care if it's 3.875. are we going up? Or are we going down? What are we doing with this information? So that's an example of like, you can kill people with all of this data. We have so much data, we don't even know what to do with it. So our job is to process that data, and to identify what is the data telling us? What's the context? What's the meaning? What do we do with all this information? I think that's the dilemma, because you could get just drowned in all this data that's available to us now.
Would you tell the cardiologist story? I just came back last week from a stress test, so it resonated well with me.
Yeah, I went to the cardiologist for a routine exam, and he came back into the room with all the charts and the numbers and everything else. And he said, based on this information, you have a 5% chance of having a heart attack within the next 10 years. And I almost had a heart attack when he said that, right? My knees started buckling. I'm like, is this a death sentence? And then I said, wait a minute. Doesn't that mean that there's a 95% chance that I won't have a heart attack? He's like, yeah, that's another way of looking at it, right? So it's like, was he wrong with the data he gave me? No. Was he right? Yes. Was that the message he wanted to send? No, not at all. Not even close to it. So he said, your results are perfect for a, male of your age, right? So, that's the thing. So our numbers can be used to, to misconstrue things, to misinterpret, to miscommunicate. So that's the thing. Our job is to say, what are these numbers telling us and what do we do with them? So do you need to lose 5 pounds? Do you need to exercise more? What does more mean, right? So all of that's the human element of the numbers. Otherwise, you can give me a 5,000 page report with all my data. I don't know what to do with that. So I think business people do the same thing. They overload people with numbers and digits, but don't tell us, all right, what's the why should I care? And the what's in it for me for this, right? Why should I be interested? How will I benefit? And what do I do with this information? I think that's the job of leadership, is to interpret that and help point people in the right direction. Say, this is what we need to do based on this information that we have.
Yeah, I know, and a lot of my legacy viewers, this started out as a sort of health podcast around plant-based eating, hence the original metaphor, plant yourself. We try to use, statistics and numbers all the time to convince people, that our diet is a healthy one. And I remember I would go around, I would give talks, and I was more sophisticated than that. And I would, speak to audiences and, tell stories, right? And give before and after, like all the things that engage the mind. And I would all invariably get pushback from a couple of people who are like deep in the movement saying, that's not proof. You give us the numbers, give us the study, show us the p-values. And I think there's a lot, I love some of the examples and suggestions you give around, 3 out of 10 versus 30%, just to again, that we can be aware of limitations of numeracy and limitations of translating numeracy into meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, about 7 years ago, I was outgrowing my pants and my belts. And I said, I either need to get larger clothes or I need to lose some weight. And I tried that with my wife's help. I changed my diet. I lost 36 pounds in 3 months. I've kept up most of that within, over the last 7 years. But, the saying attributed to Peter Drucker, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Numbers help us. If you set a goal of, I want to get from 230, I'm 6'4", so 236 pounds is a lot, but it's not. And my goal was to get down to 200, which I did. I hit like 199.5, not sustainable. Now I'm like 210. But I didn't have to get new clothes. In fact, I did have to get new clothes. I was able to get smaller shirts. But the visual of, I have a shirt where my wife is in it with me. So like that visual of, I lost so much weight that I could fit my wife in that old shirt. I keep that shirt just as a visual, tangible reminder. But to say 36 pounds, that depends. Is that for someone who's 5 feet tall, that's more than for someone who's 6'4", right? So it's all, that number is relative to where you are and who you are and what the circumstances are. So a number in and of itself, if someone who's 36 pounds to begin with, they lose 36 pounds, that's not good, right? So it's kind of like, what's your starting point? What's the number? For someone who's 1,000 pounds, 36 is great, but I think we have a ways to go, right? So I think that's the thing, that's the scale. I use the example, if I say I have a 250 average, is that good or bad? Well, in baseball, it's okay. In bowling, it's amazing, right? So the number 250 has no meaning in and of itself. Steve Jobs says this little device holds 5 gigabytes of data. It means nothing. If you say you can carry around 1,000 songs in your pocket, wow, that's pretty cool. I could carry around my CDs with me on this little device, right? So again, how are we communicating? Are we inspiring people with these numbers? Are we changing behavior? That's what we need to think about. So that's where that visual leadership element comes in, is getting us to see things through a new lens, trying to see things through the lens of our stakeholders. If I'm talking about football, I'm usually talking about this, but someone from Europe might be thinking this, right? So both are football, but you're getting a different visual in your mind, and we may be speaking the same language, but thinking different things. So we need to be aware of who are we talking to and try to visualize things, what I call flipping the eye, try to see things through the lens of the other person.
Yeah, and I think that's, the key skill, is this kind of empathy and kind of inversion of awareness. Because, more and more, each of us is getting our own curated reality.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I mean, it's as simple as if my wife says, "Can you pick up some milk?" I could bring back regular milk, and she wanted the lactose 2%, right? So pick up some milk. It's very clear in our own mind what we want. Like, what's the color of the carton? Is it a quart or is it a half gallon or a gallon? So I always say that to managers when they say, "Oh, my people are just not doing what I want." It's like, are you clear? First of all, are you clear on what you want? And did you communicate clearly to them? Because one of my mantras is that I didn't invent it, but people are not mind readers, right? You can be very clear in your mind of what you want this thing to look like when it's done. But if it doesn't come out that way, whose fault is it? I have a story in my book. I don't know if you read it, Ice, Rice, or Mice. Has this ever happened to you? I asked for some more ice for my drink. They brought me a bowl of white rice. So I said more ice. They heard more rice. So I always ask, whose fault was that? Was it my fault? Was it the waiter's fault? Or could I have done something different, like hold up my glass and say, "Can I have some more ice?" They wouldn't have put rice in my glass, right? So if I held up my glass of Diet Coke and said, "Can I have more ice?" there's more likely that they would have, by adding that visual cue, would have understood, right? So again, that's a small example, but I also have a larger example in that chapter that cost my company over $100,000 because we didn't give the client what they wanted, because we didn't validate our understanding and say, "Is this what you want?" Right? So it happens all the time.
Yeah, I remember one of the first sales pitches I went to with Peter Bregman when I was working for him is we sit down and I do almost nothing because I'm too new at this. And he does the pitch and questions back and forth, and then it's kind of coming to a close, and he says just casually, "So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you feel like we understood your situation and what you need?" And they said,
Mhm.
9 out of 10. And I was
Wow.
like, "That's great." Peter sits back down and says, "What did I miss?"
Yeah,
And it
that's good.
continued. And I've
Yeah.
never forgotten that.
That's great. I love that. I love that. Yeah, I have a similar thing. I have a model earlier in my book called CAP, which stands for put your cap on. CAP stands for confidence, assertiveness, and presence. So it's a self-assessment I do to help people give themselves, like, I'm not very confident. I'm only a 4. Like, well, why are you a 3 then? Right? So
Mhm.
it's a different reframing. So why are you a 3 as opposed to a 0? And what would make you a 5? Right? What's the difference between a 4 and 5? And then little by little, you inch that person up the scale. So I love that. Similar to that Peter approach of that, just getting people to look at things through a different lens is a growth opportunity. So I love that. I'll always remember that.
Thanks. What haven't we covered that's on your mind or in your heart?
Oh, God, we covered a lot. We haven't covered Stratomatic baseball, but we can save that for another time. We both use musical references all the time, which show our generational difference,
Yeah.
similarities.
Oh,
Yeah,
I know what I want. I know what I wanted to
yeah,
ask you. Have you been watching The Studio?
yes. I just finished the last episode. Yes.
Okay. Does it remind you of real life?
Yeah, those are my yeah. I had flashbacks of my Hollywood years while watching that. So I love my favorite episode was the Ron Howard episode, who's known as being one of the truly nice guys, and he just played completely opposite his character. So,
Mm.
so that
And
was
I
great.
And I thought of that because of your story about honking to when you were trying to get the studio job, and it seemed
Hmm.
like exactly the sort of scenario that they would have put into that show.
Yeah, yeah. I had many of those Hollywood episodes. My my boss, when I worked for Aaron Spelling, he's a famous producer. He just passed away recently. But he would ask me to go to this one specific restaurant a half hour away to pick up his Chinese chicken salad on Melrose. Right. So I drove all the way back. So it took me like almost an hour in bumper to bumper traffic, lunch hour in Hollywood. And he always would say, "What took you so long?" Right. This was day before, this was long before like we had DoorDash or any of these delivery services. So he opened it up and there wasn't enough chicken in there. He's like, "This is not enough chicken. I need you to go back to them and get more chicken." So I got to get back in my car with his chicken salad, drive another half hour. So I was like, but he wasn't having lunch until like 3 hours later. But for spite, they put in so much chicken, like handfuls, globs of chicken. He opens it up and says, "Now this is a chicken salad." Like that's the kind of story that's straight out of like a Hollywood movie that he didn't care that it was 2 hours later. Like they were being obnoxious with overly chickening him. And but again, I had almost every day. So I had the horrible boss stories. I had the loony boss stories. A different boss had me spend like 20 minutes. He was going to mail an envelope, but decided not to. So he made me spend like 20 minutes trying to get that stamp off the envelope so he could reuse it. This is a guy who was making $250,000 a year back in 1990, but he wanted to salvage that stamp, that postage stamp. So I ended up not being able to do it. So I had some stamps in my wallet. I gave him one of my stamps because I was already spending 20 minutes trying to get the stamp off and I was ripping it. So rather than being yelled at, it was worth 27 cents or whatever the price of a stamp was at that time to just eat the cost. So it's like, those are the stupid Hollywood stuff that you can make it up, but real life stories. Not to mention all the horrible bosses stories, that some of which I have in my book. The boss who threw the box of pens at me because they weren't the right ones. So I've had many lawsuits, I think, in this day and age. Back then, it was just a typical day at the office. But
So
all
what's
our work experiences, our life experiences shape. Like I wouldn't have all these stories, and I wouldn't be. I'll put it this way: I wouldn't be doing what I do today if it was not for all those experiences, good and bad, that I had over the 20, 30 years leading up to it. So everything is. Nelson Mandela said, "I never lose. I either win or I learn." Right. So it's like we need to take every experience, including our wins, and say, "All right, what can I learn from this? How can I use this? How can I transfer this knowledge to other people?" Eleanor Roosevelt said, "Learn from the mistakes of others. Life's too short to make them all ourselves." Right. So I try to share with people, and also finding the humor in situations. I think that's something we both have in common. It's just finding the craziness, the wackiness, the humor in these situations. One, because they're learning experiences, but two, they're just funny, right? They're funny, silly, quirky, and memorable. And that's the power of storytelling and sharing things with other people and helping them to learn and to grow from it. It's a big problem.
Cool. So any new music you're listening to these days?
I think someone once said our musical growth stops when we graduate, on the day we graduate from college. So I'm still listening to the Ramones and the Clash and Simon and Garfunkel. So I can't think of anything within the last. Occasionally, something will pop up on my Spotify mix, but not really. I usually recycle the oldies, which is to us now the Clash and the Ramones and the Sex Pistols.
I think you need to look at your dinosaur again.
I know when it comes to music, well, I have musical playlist. I have playlists for every topic. So I have like my time management playlist with time after time. Time is on my side, like the whole list. I'm sure you could come up with a million. So every topic I teach, my students don't even recognize or appreciate it. They just think I'm playing old music again. But thematically, it gets me in a mindset. So I have my visual leadership playlist. I have my change management playlist is Bowie singing Changes on a continuous loop. So that's my
Nice.
change playlist. So when they walk in and for like the first 5 minutes, it's changes going on. So we stick with what we
Yeah.
know. But yeah.
I had a playlist that was for bathroom breaks. I can't remember what was in it, but I tried to make it ironic.
Yeah. People don't always get our irony, but I also have my rain mix. If it's raining, I have my snow mix. So probably like 20 different Spotify playlists for different thematic topics. So I get it and I appreciate it, even if other people don't. But when I do workshops with more people of our generation, they get it, they recognize it, and they appreciate it. So we try to please our audiences as much as we can. But yes, I am dinosauric when it comes to my musical taste.
Right. Well, a foolish, what is it? A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds.
Yes. Okay.
So
Yes. Yeah.
you get your dinosaur carve out.
Yeah. But TV shows like Severance, right? You can have a whole conversation. I don't know if you've watched Severance, but just about
I'm
how
not all of it. I found it too
Right.
disturbing to finish.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very disturbing, but just the idea of is our work persona and our home persona the same or different, right? How do we leave? Like when you work from home, there's no off switch, right? So how do you, what's the equivalent of that? How do you separate so you don't bring your work stresses home with you or your personal? Because when I was first started work, you know, my bosses said to me, leave your personal life at the door, right?
Hmm.
We don't care about your family. We don't care about, you know, whatever. Just, you know, come in, do your work. And then like if you had to make a personal phone call during the day to book a dentist appointment because your tooth was throbbing, you had to do that on your own personal time, right? You couldn't take 3 minutes. Calling long distance when you were actually charged for long distance calls, that was like a death penalty. Death if you were found, you know, living in LA and calling your parents back in New York because you couldn't afford long distance phone calls. How dinosauric does that conversation sound? Remember when we had a call after 7 p.m. when the rates went down? Like people can't even understand that today, right? So,
God, I remember. One of the companies had offered I was at the school I was working. They offered us free Fridays, unlimited long distance on Fridays. All the teachers, like their lunch breaks, they'll all be crammed in the office calling family.
Yeah. Someone posted something the other day. Be kind, please rewind. Now, those of us who went to Blockbuster know what that means, right? Rewind your VHS tape before you return it. And I remember someone was asking me when CDs, DVDs came out, how do you rewind a DVD? I can't figure that out. So, and that's not a joke. That's literally a question that someone once asked me. So again, with new technologies like AI and things like that, we can laugh about it now because it's so silly and ridiculous. But you know, I once said something about sounding like a broken record in my class. Those of us who grew up listening to vinyl albums know what we're talking about when that song gets stuck in the groove. My students thought that a broken record was like in the Olympics when you set a new record and win a gold medal. So when I said sounding like a broken record, their paradigm was completely had no frame of reference for that expression at all. Meanwhile, when I listen to a song now on Spotify, I expect the song to skip at the same spot that my vinyl album copy of Elvis Costello's, um, songs did. So it doesn't. So
What's your favorite Elvis Costello song?
peace, love, and understanding. All the time. That's my pump it up is another pump up the. But yeah, peace, love, and understanding is because you often reference it when it comes in terms of leadership, right? How do you create peace within your organization? Create a culture and climate of love and and communicate and think, with understanding, empathy, compassion. So as a leadership too, and there's a lot of parallels.
Yeah. I heard somebody else sing it and I realized that it was about peace, love, and understanding. When he sang it, I never got that impression.
Yeah. Well, he always sounded angry no matter what he was doing. So yes.
Cool. So before I let you go, who do you work with? Who's listening to this? Who should say, "Oh, I should reach out to Todd"?
Yeah, man. My day job is I'm an executive coach. I do management training and leadership development, all using my visual leadership approach, methodology, and philosophy. Anyone who needs help getting other people to see what they're saying could benefit from what I do. So whether it's one-on-one, teams, that's really anyone and everyone who needs to communicate more effectively and wants to be a more visual thinker, communicator, and visual leader.
Great. And where do they find you?
The two best ways, toddcherches.com, and it's Cherches with an E. And that's where people can find my TED Talk, information about my book and my services, and also just connect with me on LinkedIn. Both of us live on LinkedIn. So just say you saw me on Howie's show, connect with me on LinkedIn, and happy to continue the conversation right there.
All right. Well, Todd Cherches, thank you so much. This has been fun.
Thanks.
I'm sure we can have a lot more offline fun conversations that the rest of the world doesn't need to listen to, but we'll keep those going.
I look
Thanks for the
forward.
work you do in the world and for taking the time today.
Thank you, Ari. Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap. You can find the show notes with links to everything we talked about at plantyourself.com/626. Movement news, things are steady. I'm still doing my morning workouts 3 mornings a week on the beach. And I have added a couple of short runs, 2.5 to 3 mile jogs, really, just to get back into the flow of things. In business news, I wanted to let folks know that I am now working with executives and teams around preparation for 2030. I know that sounds like it's a long time away, but it's actually closer than COVID. And COVID, to me, at least seems like just yesterday. And this idea about 2030 is we are living in an age of so much disruption, whether it's technological from AI, which is transforming businesses almost on a daily basis, to geopolitical instability, to climate instability. And it feels like one of these sort of mass extinction moments. And I want good people, good organizations that are working together for solutions to make a better world, to make a more beautiful world, to survive these times. So I've put together a list of 36 key skills that people are going to need even in the AI age to improve themselves, to collaborate, and to create systems that are robust enough to deal with whatever challenges, because we don't know what those challenges are going to be. We don't know what the future will look like. We don't know what the next breakthrough will be. We don't know what the next geopolitical tectonic shift or eruption will be. And we need skills to be able to deal with the stress in our own lives, to deal with the cultural shifts that are happening all around us, and to be able to use AI and to use each other as thinking partners and as resources to get through this and move to a higher level of functioning and, dare I say, consciousness. If you're interested in that, you can reach out to me. You can email me directly at hj@plantyourself.com, or you can check out my business site, howiejacobson.com. All right, that's it for this week. As always, be well, my friends.